The transport shuttle landed at Station Zenith Prime with a soft hum. Jake Morrison grabbed his bag and stepped out into the massive arrival bay. This place would be his home for the next 2 years. The station was huge, bigger than anything he had seen back on Earth. Around him, cadets from different alien species walked in groups. Some were tall and made of crystal. Others were small and moved very fast. Jake had never seen so many different types of beings in one place. A voice spoke behind him. Jake turned around and saw a reptile-like alien with 4 arms. Her skin was covered in shiny scales and her eyes were different from human eyes. They looked at him with clear interest. Jake stood up straight. He knew this was an instructor from the badge on her uniform. Her name was Commander Xylith. Commander Xylith studied him for a moment. She had heard about humans and their strange reputation. But seeing one in person was different from reading reports. The human looked small compared to many other species at the academy. She told Jake to follow her. As they walked through the long corridors, Jake noticed that everyone was staring at him. He understood why. Humans were new to the Galactic Alliance. His species had only made first contact 7 years ago. Most aliens had heard stories about humans, but very few had actually met one. The training area was enormous. Different sections had different levels of gravity. Some areas had special air for species that breathed different gases. Everything was designed to train soldiers from hundreds of different worlds. Commander Xylith brought Jake to a large open space. Other cadets were already standing in neat rows. She announced that Jake was the human representative for this training group. Her voice was firm and clear. She told everyone to treat him like any other cadet. Jake looked at his new classmates. There was a very strong-looking alien who seemed amused by Jake's size. A tall, thin alien with silver eyes watched him carefully. Others had thick armor, wings, or features Jake had never imagined. Each species looked so different from humans. Commander Xylith ordered Jake to join the formation. She said physical training would start in 10 minutes. The cadet standing next to Jake leaned over slightly. He introduced himself as Len Kavros. His species was known for being diplomatic and very fast. Kavros spoke quietly, warning Jake that the first training session was always hard. He said that many new cadets ended up needing medical help. He told Jake not to feel bad if he needed to quit. Jake thanked him for the advice. He said he would try his best. Kavros looked at Jake with what seemed like sympathy. He had read that humans were fragile compared to most spacefaring species. He genuinely hoped the human would not get hurt too badly on his first day. Commander Xylith returned with 2 other instructors. One was massive with thick armor plating. The other moved like a predator, smooth and dangerous. They explained that today was assessment day. The cadets would complete an obstacle course, then combat drills, then endurance tests. The purpose was to understand each cadet's starting abilities. This was not meant to be easy. They were training to become soldiers who would defend entire worlds. The obstacle course looked brutal. Jake watched as other cadets attempted it. Walls shifted while cadets climbed them. Gaps suddenly became wider. Some sections changed gravity without warning. Each species used their natural advantages. The strong aliens powered through with pure muscle. The flying aliens soared over parts that others had to climb. Everyone had something they were good at. When it was Jake's turn, he approached the course with focus. He could not fly or match the raw strength of larger aliens, but he could think quickly and push through discomfort. When a wall was too smooth to climb normally, he used a running start for momentum. When a gap looked too wide, he found a better angle to jump from. Halfway through the course, Jake missed a handhold. He fell about 10 feet and hit the padded floor hard. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. His shoulder exploded with pain. For a few seconds, he just lay there trying to breathe. He heard the course pause as instructors started moving toward him. Then Jake pushed himself up. He rolled his shoulder once, testing it. It hurt a lot, but everything still moved. He climbed back to where he had fallen. In his mind, there were only 2 choices. He could finish the course or he could quit. Those were the only options that mattered to him. Commander Xylith called out that he might need medical attention. Jake called back that he was fine. His shoulder throbbed with every movement and he knew he would have a huge bruise later, but nothing felt broken. He had experienced worse during training back home on Earth. Jake finished the course. His time was not the best. His technique was not the most graceful, but he completed it. When he dropped down at the end, breathing hard, he saw that most of the other cadets were staring at him. They looked confused and maybe a little scared. The large alien named Grant approached. He asked why Jake had continued after falling. He had seen the impact and thought it would have stopped any creature Jake's size. Jake straightened up while catching his breath. He said he continued because the course was not finished yet. The silver-eyed alien named Sarah spoke up. She said she could see the damage to Jake's shoulder from across the room. Her species had excellent vision. She wanted to know why he did not stop when he was clearly injured. Jake rotated his shoulder carefully. It hurt, yes, but it worked. He told them it was just bruised. He had experienced worse injuries before. The way they all looked at him made Jake realize something important. Humans apparently had a very different idea of what counted as a real injury. Commander Xylith approached with a medical scanner. She ran it over his shoulder. Her face showed more confusion as she read the results. She told Jake that he had significant tissue damage and minor structural damage to his bones, yet he had kept going. She wanted to know why he did not ask for help. Jake shrugged with his good shoulder. He said he could still move it. It hurt, but it still worked. To him, that meant he could continue. Xylith exchanged looks with the other instructors. Jake could not read their expressions. Then she made notes on her electronic pad. She told Jake to report to medical after training for proper treatment. But first she addressed the entire class. She said they all had much to learn from different perspectives. Training was dismissed for a break. Combat drills would begin in 1 hour. As the cadets walked away, Jake heard whispers and saw sideways glances. He had only been at the academy for a few hours, and he was already the strange one. He was the alien here, and everyone knew it now. By the second day at the academy, everyone seemed to know about the human cadet who fell 10 feet and walked it off. Jake discovered this when he entered the cafeteria for breakfast. The moment he walked in, conversations got quieter. Many heads turned to look at him. Some aliens stared openly, while others tried to look without being obvious about it. Jake picked up a food tray. The cafeteria staff had prepared meals suitable for human digestion. He looked around for somewhere to sit. Kavros waved at him from a table where several cadets from their training group were eating. Jake sat down and greeted everyone. His shoulder was still sore from yesterday, but the medical treatment had helped speed up the healing. The doctor who treated him had been a small alien named Chivix. He had spent 20 minutes asking Jake questions about human pain tolerance and how humans responded to injuries. Apparently, the fact that Jake had been walking around with what other species considered a serious injury was worth studying. Grant spoke between bites of his enormous breakfast. The large alien said that the instructors had been talking about Jake. He ate enough food to feed 3 humans. Jake assumed they were not saying good things. He started eating his own meal. Sarah disagreed with Jake's assumption. She sat with perfect posture, her meal arranged neatly. She said that Commander Xylith had told the senior staff that Jake showed remarkable pain tolerance and determination. However, Xylith also noted that humans seemed to have a dangerous disregard for their own safety. A new voice joined the conversation. Jake looked up and saw a cadet he had not met before. She had glowing patterns on her skin that changed colors. She asked if it was true that humans evolved as pursuit predators. Jake confirmed this was true. He explained that human ancestors would chase prey animals for hours, sometimes even days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. The entire table went silent. Even Grant stopped eating, which seemed like a significant thing. Kavros repeated the word slowly. Days humans would chase something for entire days. Jake clarified that he personally had never done that. But yes, that was how early humans hunted. Humans were not the fastest species and not the strongest either. But humans could keep going when other animals had to stop and rest. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. She said this explained many things. It explained Jake's pain tolerance, his endurance, and even his psychological approach to obstacles. Humans were built to continue no matter what. Before Jake could respond, an announcement came over the station speakers. All first-year cadets needed to report to Training Complex 7. Combat assessment would begin in 20 minutes. Everyone quickly finished eating and headed out. As they walked through the corridors, Jake noticed more stares and more whispers. Being the only human at the academy was going to take some getting used to. Training Complex 7 was set up like a large arena. Different types of terrain were scattered throughout. There were obstacles and, somewhat worryingly, weapon stations along the walls. Commander Xylith stood in the center with other instructors and some senior staff Jake did not recognize. Once all cadets had gathered, Xylith made an announcement. Today they would begin combat training. Each cadet would be paired with an opponent of similar size and weight. The goal was simple. They needed to demonstrate their species' natural fighting abilities and show they could adapt to an opponent's strategy. These were not fights to the death or even to unconsciousness. They would spar until an instructor stopped the match. She started reading names and pairings. Grant was matched with another member of his species. Sarah was paired with another of her kind. When she reached Jake's name, she paused for a moment. She announced that Jake would fight another human named Lisa Yang. Jake looked around in surprise. He had not known there was another human at the academy. He spotted her across the arena. She was shorter than him but looked fit and strong. Her dark hair was pulled back practically. She looked just as surprised as he felt. They met in the center of one of the fighting rings. Other pairs moved to their assigned areas. Up close, Jake could see the same mixture of nervousness and determination in Lisa's eyes that he felt himself. Lisa said quietly that she had not expected to fight another human on her second day. Jake agreed. He guessed the instructors wanted to see what humans could do without worrying about different alien body types. The instructor overseeing their ring was a scarred alien named Torval. He told them to get into ready positions. Jake and Lisa faced each other. Both took basic defensive stances. At the signal, they began fighting. It became clear quickly that Lisa had more formal training than Jake. She moved with precision. Her strikes were controlled and technical. Jake relied more on instinct. He dodged when he could and countered when he saw openings. They traded blows back and forth. Neither could gain a clear advantage. Jake managed to land a solid hit to her stomach. She responded with a quick punch that split his lip. Jake tasted blood in his mouth but barely noticed it. He was too focused on the fight. Around them, other matches were ending. The very strong aliens were grappling with tremendous force. The fast aliens moved like dancers with perfect speed and precision. But in ring after ring, fights were being stopped. One fighter would show clear superiority, or someone would take a hit that needed medical attention. In the human ring, Jake and Lisa kept fighting. A strike to Jake's ribs made him grunt in pain, but he pushed through it and managed to sweep her legs out from under her. She rolled with the fall smoothly and came up ready to continue. Jake's knuckles were scraped raw. He was pretty sure she had bruised something when she hit him in the side, but neither of them slowed down. Finally, Instructor Torval called out for them to stop. They both stepped back immediately, breathing hard from the effort. Torval approached with his medical scanner already out. He examined them both. His expression grew more confused as he looked at the readings. He said they both had multiple bruises, small cuts, and possible tissue damage. Yet neither had signaled that they wanted to stop. Lisa asked if they should have stopped. She sounded genuinely confused by the question. Jake noticed that all the other fighting rings had stopped. Cadets from across the arena were watching their conversation now. Torval said slowly that most species would have stopped after the first significant impact. He turned to address Commander Xylith, who had walked over to see what was happening. He reported that the humans had been exchanging blows that would knock out most species their size. Yet they showed no signs of wanting to stop. Their pain response seemed significantly delayed or suppressed somehow. Xylith studied them both with her scanner. She said it was remarkable. Their bodies were registering the damage. Their systems were responding appropriately to injury. Yet they continued to function at almost full capacity. She made several notes on her device. She told Jake and Lisa to report to medical for treatment. Then she addressed the entire class. She said they should all observe and think about what they had witnessed. Different species brought different abilities to the Alliance. Understanding these differences would make them better soldiers and better allies. As Jake and Lisa walked toward the medical bay, Jake heard pieces of conversation from other cadets. One said they had seen the humans beating each other bloody, and neither stopped. Another said humans must not feel pain like other species. A third corrected them, saying humans probably did feel pain but just did not care about it. In the medical bay, Dr. Chivix examined them both with clear fascination. He said this was 2 humans in 2 days, both with injuries that should have sent other species into shock or made them pass out. Both were fully functional. He said he needed to update the medical database extensively. Lisa asked while Chivix treated a cut above her eye if this was really that unusual. Chivix's voice went high with excitement. He told Lisa that her pain tolerance exceeded species 3 times her size. Her ability to function through injury surpassed the military conditioning of most Alliance races. And according to her file, this was normal for humans. Jake and Lisa looked at each other with understanding. They were learning that what seemed normal to humans was apparently extraordinary to everyone else in the galaxy. By the end of the first week, Jake Morrison and Lisa Yang had become somewhat famous at the Galactic Military Academy. Their fellow cadets treated them with a strange mixture of respect and nervousness. The instructors watched them with scientific interest, clearly adjusting how they evaluated human performance. The endurance trial changed everything even more. The concept was simple enough. Cadets would run a course through different types of terrain while carrying equipment that got heavier as they progressed. The goal was to measure stamina, strength, and determine at what point each species reached their physical limits. Jake found himself running next to Kavros. They were both in the medium weight group. The alien was faster in short sprints, but as the course continued and the weight increased, Jake noticed his friend starting to struggle. Kavros was breathing hard as they climbed a steep hill. Each of them carried 50 pounds of gear on their backs. He told Jake between gasps that he did not understand human body design. Jake's muscles were smaller than his own. Human lungs were less efficient. Yet Jake kept the same pace without seeming to struggle as much. Jake was also breathing hard from the effort. He explained between breaths that it was just different evolution. Humans were built for long distances, not for speed. They reached the top of the hill and found the next checkpoint. Instructors waited there to add another 20 pounds to each pack. Several cadets from earlier groups were there already. They had reached their limits and could not continue. Some were being treated for overheating. Others simply could not carry the additional weight over long distances. Kavros looked at the new weight being added to his pack. Then he looked at the course stretching ahead into the distance. His shoulders dropped in defeat. He said he had to withdraw. His species could not sustain this much weight over such a long distance. Jake told him he had made it further than most cadets. That was worth being proud of. Kavros looked at Jake with an expression that seemed sad. He said Jake would go much further. He was beginning to understand why the galaxy feared humanity's potential. Jake was confused by this comment. He asked why anyone would fear humans, but Kavros had already moved toward the medical area, leaving Jake to continue with the shrinking group of cadets still in the trial. The course kept going. It seemed endless. Cadets dropped out one by one as they reached their limits. The very strong aliens lasted a long time. Their raw power helped them carry heavy weight. But eventually even Grant had to stop. His breathing became labored and dangerous. The flying aliens had been among the first to quit. Their bodies were designed for flight, not for carrying heavy loads on the ground. Jake kept running. His legs burned with fatigue. His shoulders ached from the pack straps digging into them. Sweat poured down his face despite the comfortable temperature. But Jake knew his own body well. He understood the difference between pain that meant something hurt and pain that meant something was being damaged. He was still in the first category, so he could keep going. At the final checkpoint, only 3 cadets remained in the trial. There was Jake, Lisa, and an alien named Kex, whose species was famous throughout the galaxy for being warriors. They each received the final weight addition. Their packs now weighed over 100 pounds each. Kex looked at the 2 humans with obvious confusion. He spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. He said their species was small compared to his. They should have failed long ago. How were they still continuing? Lisa wiped sweat from her face. She said simply that they were not done yet. The 3 of them ran the final section together. 3 cadets from 3 very different worlds, all pushing themselves toward the finish line. Jake's vision started to narrow from exhaustion. His body was screaming for him to stop and rest. But the end was visible ahead. Next to him, Lisa was clearly struggling too. Her breathing sounded harsh and painful. But neither human stopped moving. Kex crossed the finish line first. His longer legs gave him an advantage in the final stretch. Jake and Lisa crossed almost at the same time, just a few seconds behind the warrior alien. Jake dropped his heavy pack and bent over with his hands on his knees. He tried to catch his breath and calm his racing heart. Then he heard applause. Looking up with surprise, he saw that nearly every cadet and instructor in the facility had gathered to watch them finish. Commander Xylith approached. Her face was hard to read. She said that in 20 years of running this trial, she had never seen cadets of their size complete the full course with maximum weight. The warrior species like Kex's people did it regularly. The very strong species occasionally managed it. But humans? She looked at her electronic notepad with confusion. According to their models of human body design, Jake and Lisa should have reached failure 3 checkpoints earlier. Jake said between heavy breaths that he was sorry for messing up her data. Xylith told him he misunderstood. He had not messed up anything. He had revealed that their models for understanding human capabilities were completely wrong and inadequate. She turned to address everyone watching. She said this should be a lesson to them all. Never assume you understand a species' limits based on surface appearances. Humans looked fragile and weak, yet they possessed endurance that surpassed species that were literally engineered for warfare. That evening, Jake was lying in his quarters. Every single muscle in his body ached with fatigue. His communication device made a sound indicating he had a message. It was a recorded message from his father back on Earth. His dad's voice was warm and proud. He said he had received Jake's last update about training. It sounded like Jake was making quite an impression up there. His mother wanted to remind Jake not to push himself too hard, but his dad had told her that was like asking water not to be wet. He chuckled in the recording. They were proud of him. He should show the aliens what humans could do. Jake smiled despite how tired he felt. He was definitely showing them what humans could do. He was just starting to understand that human abilities were apparently much more impressive than he had ever realized. Someone knocked on his door. Jake called out for them to come in. Lisa entered. She looked as exhausted as Jake felt. She dropped into the chair at his desk without ceremony. She said she wanted to check if he was still alive after that trial. Jake agreed it had been brutal, but they had completed it successfully. Lisa said she had noticed how the other cadets looked at them, like humans were either monsters or superheroes. She could not figure out which one they thought humans were. Jake thought about this question. He said maybe humans were both. He had been reading about the different Alliance species since arriving at the Academy. Most of them evolved on worlds with fewer dangerous predators and more stable climates. They did not need the same kind of endurance that humans developed on Earth. Lisa said so humans were the weird ones in the galaxy. Jake pointed out that humans had always been weird. Humans were persistence hunters in a galaxy full of ambush predators and plant-eating species. Humans were social pack animals who decided to travel to space. Yes, humans were definitely weird. Lisa laughed at his description. When he explained it that way, it made sense. She stood up carefully, stretching her sore muscles. She said they had close-quarters combat training tomorrow. Jake should try to get some rest. After she left, Jake lay back and closed his eyes. His body hurt in about a dozen different places. He could feel every bruise, every strain, every ache from the week's intense training. But underneath all the pain was something else, pride. He was succeeding here. Humans were succeeding here. They were holding their own among species that had been traveling through space for thousands of years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new training. His shoulder would probably still ache. He would push himself too hard again because that was what the training required. But he was proving something important. Humans belonged here among the stars. The third week of training brought simulation exercises. These were complex scenarios designed to test tactical thinking and how well teams work together under pressure. Jake found himself assigned to a mixed species squad for an urban combat scenario. They would simulate retaking a city district from hostile forces. His squad included Kavros, Sarah, a heavily armored alien named Vex, and a winged alien named Skyrus. Commander Xylith had apparently decided that mixing different species would force them to learn how to work with very different abilities and limitations. Their instructor explained the mission clearly. Hostile forces controlled this sector of the simulated city. The squad needed to clear it building by building. The simulation would respond intelligently to their tactics. Any injury sustained in the simulation would be translated into pain signals sent to their brains. The pain would be strong enough to teach caution, but would not cause actual physical harm. However, he paused meaningfully. The scenario would continue until completion or until all squad members were killed in the simulation. Sarah raised her hand with a question. She asked how lethal the pain feedback was set for humans. The instructor checked his device. He said it was set to standard levels for their mass and durability class. He asked why she wanted to know. Sarah explained calmly that based on what she had observed, standard settings might not provide adequate feedback for humans. They might not register that they had been killed in the simulation until well after other species would have stopped functioning. The instructor looked at Jake with a frown. He said the simulation used pain feedback to teach tactical awareness. Jake needed to treat simulated injuries as if they were real. Did he understand? Jake confirmed that he understood. They entered the simulation chamber. Suddenly, they were standing in a war-torn street. The detail was incredible and realistic. Jake could see rubble, damaged buildings, and hear distant sounds of combat. The weapon in his hands felt completely real, even though he knew everything was sophisticated holographic technology, combined with signals sent directly to his brain. Sarah naturally took charge of the group. She told Vex to take the lead position because his thick armor made him ideal for first contact with enemies. She ordered Skyrus to do aerial reconnaissance from above. Kavros would use his speed to cover their flank. Jake would stay with Sarah to provide covering fire. They moved carefully through the simulated streets. Skyrus called down reports from his position in the air. Vex's heavy footsteps led the way. They cleared the first two buildings without encountering any enemies, but Jake could feel tension rising in the group. This felt too easy, like a trap. The ambush came from multiple directions at once. Simulated enemy fire erupted from windows and doorways all around them. They were caught exposed in an open intersection. Jake dove for cover behind a low wall. He felt the neural feedback of near misses as burning sensations across his skin. Kavros shouted that Skyrus was hit. The winged alien had taken fire and was struggling to stay in the air. He came down hard on a nearby rooftop. Sarah gave quick orders. She told Vex to suppress the enemy in that window with covering fire. She told Jake to come with her. They were going to rescue Skyrus. Jake followed her in a sprint across open ground. The neural feedback was intense as simulated bullets hit him. His mind interpreted them as real impacts even though he knew they were not actually happening. He registered hits to his leg, his arm, his chest. Each one sent pain signals screaming through his nervous system, but his actual body was still moving and still functional. So Jake pushed through the pain and kept running. They reached the building and started climbing the external fire escape. Enemy fire continued hitting them the whole way up. Jake felt what the simulation registered as a hit to his shoulder. It was the same shoulder he had injured on his first day. The feedback pain was intense enough to make him gasp and nearly lose his grip. But his arm still worked, so he kept climbing. His suit's artificial intelligence spoke in his ear. It informed him that he had taken critical damage. He should be unable to continue. Jake said through gritted teeth that he was not done yet. He reached the roof right behind Sarah. Skyrus was down on the rooftop. His wing was damaged in the simulation. He said he was out of action. They should leave him and complete the mission. Jake said that was not going to happen. He looked at Sarah and asked if she could cover them. Sarah stared at him with an unreadable expression. She said she had seen him take at least 5 hits that should have been fatal. Why was he still able to function? Jake repeated Lisa's words from the endurance trial. He said they were not done yet. Then he asked again if Sarah could cover them. Sarah nodded and moved to a good position. Her weapon started firing precisely controlled bursts at the enemy. Jake helped Skyrus stand up. He supported the lighter alien's weight on his shoulders. The feedback was telling him he had been shot multiple times. It said he had critical injuries. It said he should be in shock and unable to move. His heads-up display flashed urgent warnings about his simulated condition, but his actual physical body underneath all the simulation was perfectly fine. He could do this. Getting down from the roof was harder than climbing up had been. Jake took more simulated hits. Each one added to the overwhelming amount of pain signals his brain was trying to process. Somewhere in the distance he heard Kavros shout that he was down and out of the fight. He heard Vex's heavy weapon go silent, meaning the big alien was out too. But Jake kept moving, kept supporting Skyrus, kept pushing toward their designated extraction point. They were 3 blocks away from safety when Jake's legs finally gave out. It was not from actual injury. It was from the accumulated neural feedback completely overwhelming his nervous system. He collapsed to the simulated ground, still trying to drag Skyrus forward with him. Sarah's voice came through his communication device. She told him to stop moving. He was medically deceased according to simulation parameters. He had been dead for the last 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The simulation ended suddenly. The ruined city disappeared, revealing the white walls of the training chamber. Jake lay on the floor. His nervous system was still processing all the phantom pains from the simulation. Medical staff rushed in immediately. Dr. Chivix appeared above him. His scanner was working frantically. He said Jake had sustained what the simulation registered as 14 critical hits. Yet Jake had continued to function anyway. The neural feedback alone should have made him unconscious. He asked how Jake felt. Jake said honestly that he felt like he had been shot 14 times, but he said he was okay otherwise. Chivik said firmly that Jake was very much not okay. His stress hormones were elevated to dangerous levels. His brain activity showed significant trauma processing. He needed treatment and rest immediately. Medical staff helped Jake stand up. He saw the rest of his squad gathering nearby. Skyrus approached with a solemn expression on his alien features. The winged alien spoke quietly. He said Jake had carried him while fatally wounded. It was only a simulation, yes, but the pain was real. The feedback was real. Why had Jake not stopped when the simulation said he was dead? Jake said simply that Skyrus needed help. That was reason enough. Commander Xylith entered the chamber. Her expression looked angry. She told Jake they needed to talk privately right now. Jake followed her to a separate room. His body still ached from all the feedback. She turned on him the moment the door closed behind them. She said what he had done was either the bravest or most foolish thing she had witnessed in her entire career. He had ignored critical injury warnings from the simulation. He had pushed through pain that should have made him unable to continue. He had functioned while the simulation said he was medically dead. She paused and then asked him directly why he did it. Jake explained that in a real combat situation, stopping might mean a teammate dies. He knew it was just a simulation, but the tactical reality did not change. If he could still move, he should be helping his squad. Xylith studied him for a long moment. She said his species frightened her. Jake himself frightened her. The capacity to ignore self-preservation instincts and to function through injuries that should be debilitating made humans incredibly dangerous. Dangerous both to enemies and to themselves. Jake started to apologize for causing problems, but she held up one hand to stop him. She said he had not done anything wrong. In fact, his performance was shocking, but demonstrated exactly the kind of dedication the Alliance needed in its soldiers. However, it also showed why they needed to carefully consider how to integrate humans into their military forces. Standard protocols did not account for the human ability to ignore their own body's warning systems. She made notes on her device. She said Jake would undergo psychological evaluation to make sure this incident had not caused lasting mental harm. He would also work with medical staff to establish better parameters for human simulation training. Then she added one more thing. What Jake did was remarkable. It was possibly reckless and foolhardy, but it was remarkable nonetheless. That alien was alive in the simulation because Jake refused to acknowledge his own simulated death. That kind of determination would either make him a legendary soldier or get him killed in real combat. Jake said he would try for the first option. Xylith told him to make sure that he did. The psychological evaluation was conducted by an alien counselor named Mira. Her species had glowing patterns on their skin that changed colors based on emotions. Jake found it oddly calming to watch the gentle blue waves pulse across her skin as they talked. Mira spoke gently. She said Jake understood that he was not actually injured in the simulation. The simulation could not harm him physically in any real way. Jake confirmed that he understood this completely. Mira continued carefully. Yet Jake had continued to function while his brain was experiencing what it interpreted as fatal injuries. Most species would have entered a protective shock state that shut down their body. Jake's continued function suggested either an extreme tolerance for suffering or a complete disconnection from normal self-preservation instincts. Her patterns shifted to a concerned purple color. She asked Jake to help her understand which one it was. Jake thought carefully about how to answer. He said it was neither of those things, really. Or maybe it was both at the same time. Humans felt pain just like any other species. Humans did not enjoy pain, but humans evolved in an environment where stopping because something hurt could mean death. Prey animals do not stop running because they are tired. Hunters do not give up because their feet hurt. Humans learned to understand the difference between pain that meant something hurt and pain that meant something was actually killing them. Mira pointed out that in the simulation, according to all the programmed parameters, Jake was killed multiple times over. Jake explained that his real body was perfectly fine, though. The pain was just information his brain was receiving. It hurt, absolutely, But he knew it was not causing real damage to his actual body, so he could push through it and ignore it. Mira's patterns swirled in thoughtful colors. She said Jake possessed a kind of awareness that allowed him to override his body's distress signals when he knew intellectually that they were not, indicating true danger. Jake agreed that this seemed accurate. Mira said it was fascinating and also terrifying. Her patterns flickered orange briefly, which Jake had learned meant concern or fear. She asked if Jake knew what the other species at the academy called humans now in their informal conversations. Jake shook his head. He had not heard any particular nickname. Mira leaned forward slightly. She said they called humans the unyielding ones. There were cadets who believed humans could not be stopped by any conventional means. Other cadets believed humans felt no fear at all. Still others thought all humans were slightly insane. She asked what Jake wanted other species to understand about humanity. Jake considered this question seriously. He said he wanted them to understand that humans were not fearless. Humans were not immune to pain or suffering. Humans were just stubborn. Humans were the species that looked at a mountain and decided to climb it simply because it was there. Humans looked at the vast ocean and decided to cross it. Humans looked at distant stars and decided to visit them. Humans failed at things constantly, but they kept trying anyway. That was what made them human. Mira's pattern settled into a warm golden color. She said that was perhaps the most sensible thing she had heard Jake say during their entire conversation. He was cleared to continue training, but she strongly recommended that he help educate his fellow cadets about human nature. This widespread misunderstanding could lead to dangerous assumptions during actual field operations. Over the following weeks, Jake found himself doing exactly what Mira suggested. It started with small conversations in the cafeteria. He explained that yes, humans felt pain normally, and no, humans did not have death wishes or seek out danger purposefully. But gradually these conversations grew into something larger and more organized. Commander, Xylith asked both Jake and Lisa to give a formal presentation about human body design and psychology to the entire cadet group. They stood in front of hundreds of beings from across the known galaxy and tried to explain what it meant to be human. Lisa spoke to the assembled crowd first. She said humans were not special or unique. Humans were not super soldiers or genetically engineered warriors. Humans were simply adapted for endurance and persistence over long periods, where many alien species were designed by evolution for speed or strength or specialized abilities. Humans were designed for not giving up easily. Jake added to her explanation. He said there was an old human saying that went like this: "It is not the size of the dog in the fight that matters. It is the size of the fight in the dog." Humans might not be the biggest species or the strongest species in the galaxy, but humans did not quit easily once they started something. Afterward, Kavros approached them both. He said he had been researching human history in the Academy database. Human civilization had faced extinction multiple times throughout its development. Ice ages threatened them. Massive volcanic eruptions threatened them. Disease and war threatened them constantly. Yet humanity persisted through all of it. Humans were perhaps the most stubborn species in the entire galaxy. Jake was not sure if that was a compliment. He said thanks with an uncertain tone. Kavros assured him it was absolutely a compliment. Human stubbornness might be exactly what the Alliance needed right now. The various species had grown perhaps too comfortable and too reliant on technological superiority. Humans reminded everyone that willpower and determination still mattered greatly. As training continued over the following weeks, Jake noticed a shift in how other cadets treated him and Lisa. The nervousness remained to some degree, but it was now mixed with genuine respect. In joint exercises, squad leaders began using the human cadets differently. They understood that humans could push through situations that would stop other species completely. During a survival training exercise in a simulated hostile environment, it was Jake who insisted they keep moving through a dangerous sandstorm. Other species wanted to seek shelter and wait it out, but Jake argued they could make it to their objective if they just kept going. They reached their goal hours ahead of the expected schedule. In zero-gravity combat training, Lisa demonstrated something important. Humans were not naturally adapted to fighting without gravity like some species were, but humans could learn new skills and adapt quickly to strange environments. She found creative and unconventional solutions to problems that surprised the instructors. One day after particularly difficult training, Grant pulled Jake aside privately. The massive alien spoke with unusual seriousness. He said he had fought beside many warriors from many different species during his career. He had never fought beside humans before coming to this academy. He understood now why humanity was offered full alliance membership so quickly after first contact. Humans were force multipliers in military terms, not through superior technology or physical might, but through sheer refusal to accept defeat under any circumstances. Jake pointed out that humans lost battles and wars sometimes too. Humans were not invincible. Grant replied that this was true, but humans never stopped fighting even when losing. That made all the difference in the galaxy. The final evaluation of their first training period was comprehensive and thorough. It tested combat skills, tactical knowledge, leadership capability, and team integration. Jake knew he was not at the top of the class in any single individual category. But when the final rankings were posted publicly, he found himself in the top 15% of all cadets overall. More importantly, next to his name and Lisa's names were official commendations. The commendations praised their exceptional perseverance and outstanding resilience under pressure. That evening, Jake found himself on one of the station's observation decks. A group of cadets from his class were there looking out at the stars together. They were beings from a dozen different worlds, all training to defend those worlds together. Sarah asked Jake what he was thinking about as he stared into space. Jake said honestly that he was thinking about how incredibly big the galaxy was. He was thinking about how different all their species were from each other. And yet here they all were, training together for a common purpose. Kavros agreed they were all very different. But perhaps that was the real strength of the Galactic Alliance. Each species brought unique capabilities to the common defense. The very strong species brought raw power. The fast and precise species brought accuracy and speed. The flying species brought mobility and aerial advantage. Skyrus asked a question then. What exactly did humans bring to the Alliance? Jake thought about all the falls he had walked off during training. He thought about the pain he had pushed through. He thought about the simulated death he had ignored to complete the mission. He thought about human history and all the explorers and pioneers who had looked at impossible odds and tried anyway. Jake said finally that humans brought stubbornness to the galaxy. Humans brought the refusal to give up or quit. Humans brought the belief that if something needed doing, it could be accomplished if you just kept trying long enough. Bex rumbled his approval in his deep voice. He said the Unyielding Ones was a good name for humanity. Jake smiled slightly. He said he had been called worse things in his life. As they stood together looking at the infinite stars, Jake realized something important. This was what he had hoped for when he applied to the Academy in the first place. Not to prove humans were superior to other species. Not to dominate or intimidate anyone. The fourth month of training brought advanced tactical operations. These exercises were designed to prepare cadets for real combat situations they might face after graduation. Jake had grown accustomed to the stares and whispers that followed him through the station corridors. The nickname had stuck firmly. Everyone called humans the Unyielding Ones now, though most said it with respect rather than fear. Commander Xylith had organized a week-long field exercise on one of the station's massive training decks. The scenario was complex. Multiple squads would compete and cooperate in a shifting battlefield environment. Objectives would change without warning. Supply lines would be disrupted. Casualties would occur and force squads to adapt. It was designed to be as close to real warfare as simulation could achieve. Jake's squad had changed since the early days. He was now officially the second in command under Sarah's leadership. Their squad included Kavros, Grant, Skyrus, and two newer members. One was a quiet alien named Trell, whose species was known for exceptional hearing. The other was a stocky alien called Ven, who served as their communications specialist. On the first morning of the exercise, Sarah gathered them for final planning. She had learned to use each member's strengths effectively. She knew that Jake could be counted on to continue functioning even under extreme stress. She had seen it proven multiple times now. The exercise began with their squad dropped into a simulated jungle environment. The heat and humidity were oppressive, even though Jake knew it was artificial. Their first objective was to secure a strategic position on high ground before other squads could claim it. They moved quickly through dense vegetation. Skyrus scouted from above when the canopy allowed. Trell's exceptional hearing gave them early warning of other squads nearby. They reached the high ground first and began establishing defensive positions. That was when everything went wrong very quickly. An explosion rocked their position. The scenario had introduced an unexpected element. Artillery bombardment. Jake felt the simulation register a hit close to him. The feedback pain was intense and immediate. Shrapnel sensations burned across his left side. Sarah called out for a status report. Most of the squad responded quickly, but Ven was not responding. Jake moved through the smoke and confusion. He found their communications specialist down and unmoving. According to the simulation parameters, Ven had taken critical damage. Jake checked quickly. Ven was still breathing in reality, just unconscious from the neural feedback overwhelming his system. But in simulation terms, he was as good as dead. Jake made a quick decision. He grabbed Ven's communication equipment and started moving back to the defensive position. Grant called out that Jake was hit. He had seen the explosion catch Jake directly. Jake should be down too. Jake shouted back that he was still functional. They needed the communication equipment operational immediately, or they would be cut off from command. He made it back to cover and started working on the equipment. His hands shook slightly from the simulated pain his body thought it was experiencing, but the equipment was not actually complicated. He had paid attention during the technical training. Within minutes, he had communication restored. Sarah stared at him with that unreadable expression she often wore around humans. She said the simulation registered him as critically wounded. How was he operating complex equipment? Jake said simply that his hands still worked. They needed communications more than they needed him to acknowledge simulated injuries. The exercise continued for 6 more days. Jake accumulated more simulated injuries. Each scenario brought new challenges and new pain feedback. But he had learned something important about himself during these months of training. His mind could separate the simulation from reality effectively. The pain felt completely real to his nervous system. But some deeper part of his brain understood it was just information, just signals that could be acknowledged and then pushed aside when necessary. Other squads began to notice patterns. When a squad had a human member, that squad rarely failed objectives due to personnel casualties. Humans simply continued functioning long after their simulated injuries should have stopped them. It gave human-inclusive squads an enormous tactical advantage. On the final day, all remaining squads converged on a central objective. The scenario required cooperation between former competitors. Jake found himself working alongside cadets he had barely spoken to before. They looked at him with obvious curiosity mixed with caution. One cadet from another squad spoke quietly to Jake during a brief rest period. She was from a species Jake had not learned much about yet. She asked if the stories were true. Could humans really ignore fatal wounds and keep fighting? Jake tried to explain carefully. Humans could not ignore actual fatal wounds. If a human was truly dying, they would die like any other living being. But humans had unusually high pain tolerance and an ability to function through injuries that would incapacitate most other species. It was not that humans did not feel pain. They just processed it differently. The cadet seemed to consider this. She said her species had a legend about warriors who could not be killed by normal means, spirits of vengeance who would continue pursuing enemies even after death. She had thought such things were just stories. But watching humans train had made her wonder if the legends had some basis in reality. Jake assured her that humans were very much mortal and very much alive. They just had different limits than most species expected. The final objective was secured through combined effort. When the simulation finally ended, Jake felt exhausted in a way he had never experienced before. 6 days of continuous operations, even simulated ones, had taken a serious toll, but he had made it through. They all had. Commander Xylith addressed all the cadets in a formal assembly after the exercise concluded. She said this had been the most successful training exercise in Academy history. Casualty rates were lower than any previous year. Objective completion was higher. Squad cooperation had exceeded all expectations. She attributed much of this success to the influence of human training methods and human attitudes spreading through the cadet population. She explained that other species were learning from humans. They were learning that perceived limitations could be overcome with determination. They were learning that pain and discomfort were not automatic reasons to stop. They were learning that mental fortitude mattered as much as physical capability. After the assembly, Jake received a message on his communication device. It was from home. His younger sister had sent a video message this time instead of just text. Her face appeared on the screen. smiling and excited. She said the whole family had been following his progress through the official Academy updates. Everyone back home was incredibly proud. The news media on Earth was covering the human cadets at the Academy extensively. Humans were becoming known throughout the Alliance as the species that never quit. She laughed and said it was very on-brand for humanity. She told him to stay safe and keep making Earth proud. Jake smiled at the screen even though she could not see him. He recorded a response promising to do his best. He told her about his friends from different species and the incredible things he was learning. He left out most of the details about simulated injuries and pain tolerance. His family worried enough already. Later that week, Jake and Lisa were invited to a private meeting with senior Academy staff. They entered a conference room to find Commander Xylith and several high-ranking military officers from different species. A distinguished-looking alien with elaborate markings spoke first. He introduced himself as Admiral Kento of the Alliance Defense Fleet. He said he had been reviewing the performance records of all human cadets currently in training across multiple facilities. The data was remarkable and consistent. Humans showed abilities that conventional military doctrine had not accounted for. He said the Alliance military command was developing new tactical doctrines specifically designed to utilize human capabilities effectively. They were also working on better training protocols that would be appropriate for human physiology and psychology. But they needed input from actual humans to do this correctly. Lisa asked what specifically they needed from human cadets. Admiral Kento explained that they needed help understanding human limits better. The simulation parameters kept indicating that humans should be incapacitated, but humans kept functioning anyway. Medical staff could measure physical damage, but they struggled to predict when a human would actually stop fighting. This made it difficult to plan operations and manage personnel. Jake understood the problem. He said that even humans sometimes struggled to predict their own limits accurately. It depended on many factors, including motivation, training, and mental state. Two humans in identical physical condition might perform very differently depending on psychological factors. Another officer spoke up. She said this was exactly why human input was so valuable. Most species had much more predictable performance curves. You could calculate with reasonable accuracy when a soldier would reach their breaking point. Humans seemed to have breaking points that moved depending on circumstances. The meeting continued for over an hour. Jake and Lisa answered questions as honestly as they could. They tried to explain human psychology and motivation in ways that alien species might understand. It was challenging because some